One of my favorite moments in gaming was this moment in Toy Time Galaxy in Super Mario Galaxy. Was it because of the cool toy aesthetic? Was it because of the fun music that played while I crossed the parkour course? No, the real reason it's one of my favorite moments in gaming is because of a tiny Easter egg. If you duck right here and crawl into this wall and then go into first person, you'll find a tiny model train just sitting here. There's no reason for this to be here. It has no significance to the level, and it's just frankly a bit odd. While it may seem out of place, what it does accomplish is giving the player a moment of joy. For a second, there's just a little bit of joy that they've just found a secret. Players see this tiny hole and think, I wonder if I can crouch and get in there, and they are rewarded with a cute little train for that curiosity. I would argue that the act of rewarding curiosity is almost essential for me to fully enjoy a game. The example I just gave here is pretty small and fun, but many developers work this sort of reward process into the game itself, not just as an Easter egg. Though I would argue the best games combine the two, Easter eggs and actually rewarding people through the game. For example, there is a sequence of tricks that can be pulled off in Metroid Dread that allow you to get access to several items early. Now this is common in almost all Metroid games, but this isn't pointed out to you in any particular way. You are meant to just find them, and once you do, you are greatly rewarded. While you are going to get these upgrades if you played the game normally, getting them early often leads to very interesting results. You can instantly kill a couple bosses, get to places you couldn't have previously gotten to, and just do a lot of really cool stuff. However, Metroid games are an elaborate puzzle box. It's kind of expected that you'll uncover at least a few secrets and even some sequence breaks. What is really interesting is when a game that isn't an elaborate puzzle box manages to capture a similar feeling all on its own. The best game to do this in recent memory is none other than Vintage Story. At a first glance, one would be forgiven for thinking it's a Minecraft mod, or even a Minecraft clone. However, the moment you get plopped into your first world, it becomes immediately apparent that this is not the case. I won't go super in depth of the beginnings of the game, as I've already done that in my big review back in February of this year. Good video. I would strongly advise that you watch that one before you watch this one because it'll give you some much needed context. This video is made for people who have already seen that video. So if you haven't, that's okay. You just might not get some of the points that I'm talking about here, but that's up to you at the end of the day. Vintage Story takes the core of a survival sandbox game and turns the dial up to 11 on every aspect of the game's mechanics. Because of how difficult the base game is, assuming you're playing survival mode with nothing changed, none of the settings changed, just exactly how the devs intended, your curiosity is rewarded instantly. But even if you choose to tweak your world to make it a little bit easier, which I still recommend doing for your first time, your curiosity is nonetheless rewarded. So much of Vintage Story is inspired by real life, and that makes the progression feel very grounded and meaningful. I'm not just finding ores, throwing them into a furnace, and slapping the ingots on a table to make a pickaxe. No, now I'm finding clay, making a crucible, different molds, burning them so that the clay hardens, taking it out, making charcoal from trees I've chopped down with my flint tools, which takes like 3 fucking days, finding at minimum 20 copper bits in the ground or by using a gold pan, smelting them all in that crucible, taking tongs, and then pouring that molten copper into the mold and waiting for it to cool. And that's just for a copper pickaxe. It is a genuinely long process. I think in my first world, technically my second, the first one didn't go so well. It took me 10 hours of playtime to actually get copper. All the while, I'm becoming more curious about the world around me. Why are there so many ruins? What are drifters? What am I? Why is the wildlife so fucking mean to me? The game does a really wonderful job of organically building up your curiosity. While you're focusing on making farms or making tools, you begin to wonder why you're doing all of it. Why is everything so empty? And that makes it all more motivating to find out more about the world. Today's video isn't just about my latest adventures in Vintage Story, it's also about the human mind, what pushes us to learn, and how important that process of learning is. I'd like to start with something simple, moving beyond copper. What I have found is that once you get to the Copper Age, it's very easy to stay there, or maybe it's just hard to leave. It is the first time the player feels a bit more comfortable with the world. Their ability to shape and build things has increased exponentially from before. Instead of being forced to make a house from ruins or dirt with a copper saw and a pickaxe, you can finally build your own house. I think this is why I've spent so much time in my latest world stuck in the Copper Age. For a while, I didn't feel the urge to get better tools. I had no reason to. I was just so happy to be able to be making chests and upgrading my house from a pile of rubble into something real and interesting. And now I'm still kind of living out of ruins, but I've added on to them in a fun way. A shinier pile of rubble, if you will. I spent much of my time getting livestock and building up my farm. I still went mining, but I was in search of more copper more than anything else. What sparked my curiosity again were the ruins that can be found underground. Now, I had seen these before in my previous world, however, in this world I was lucky enough to find one very close to the surface. Inside was something called a translocator. Using some conveniently placed metal parts, I was able to fix the translocator. Partially. It required that I get 3 strange glowing gears. This elusive item stayed in the back of my head for a long time as I went about my daily life. I didn't really know how to find them or where they were, so I just kind of forgot about it and went on with my day. It wasn't until I was fighting drifters that this item would come back to me. Upon killing a drifter, they have a chance to give you one of 3 items: flax fibers, a rusty gear which is just currency, or this strange glowing gear. Upon this realization, I made it my mission to find 2 more of these gears as fast as possible so that I could fix the translocator. And when I did, I used them to fix the translocator, and as the name suggests, it's a fucking teleporter. It was linked to another translocator thousands of blocks away from my base in an area that I had never gone to before. When I teleported, I was in a new cave, and in this new cave I found another ruin with another translocator. Pretty soon, I was hunting for more gears. That feeling of fixing the translocator for the first time, that feeling of teleporting thousands of blocks away, and as a reward for my curiosity and dedication, was amazing. I felt elated to have stumbled across this entirely on my own. I had no idea there were teleporters in this game. Now, I recognize that I probably just spoiled that for many people watching, but hey, you knew there were going to be some spoilers coming into this one. Sorry. That accomplishment finally led me to a tiny amount of bismuth, which I knew from real life is a key ingredient in bismuth bronze. It's kind of in the name, bismuth bronze. This reminded me that I hadn't actually upgraded my tools in ages. There I was, more than halfway through year 0, just barely getting my hands on bismuth bits. The next step, I needed to find zinc, which, looking back, was directly next to the tiny amount of bismuth I had just found. Let me explain to you how I found zinc. So I left my base looking for a cave because I knew that none of the ones near my base had no zinc. There was none. None that I could find anyway. So I took off to a faraway cave in search of it. I found a sizable cave, was exploring it, and accidentally touched some water and my torch went out. There I was, in pitch darkness, not a bit of light around. I was 100% blind. Suddenly, I heard drifters around me. I immediately paused my game to assess my situation. I am in a cave, in the dark. I have no fucking clue where I am or what I'm looking at, and the drifters are coming for me. Long story short, I died in this cave, and then died again while trying to get all my items back because I again touched the water and my torch went out. So, I got my items back, went back home, and gave up on my search for zinc. I decided to ditch this cave and head to another one on the other end of my translocator, and I had very little luck in that cave too. While staring at a wall, I just happened to glance up and read zinc ore at the top of my screen. Bam! If I hadn't paused and stopped to look there is a strong likelihood that I would have never seen this. The texture for zinc ore blends in so well that it's almost indistinguishable from other rocks around it. While a little bit upsetting, this revelation made me laugh. I was genuinely happy to have found this. Finally, I'm able to make my first bismuth tools. I could finally progress a little bit more. This is how Vintage Story rewards dedication. There is a universe where I gave up looking entirely after I died in that other cave with no light. There's a world where I was scared to go caving at all because of the dangerous things that lurk within the dark. But I kept going because I knew I would find zinc eventually if I stumbled into it. It just took some time and effort. I guess a little bit of observation. I cannot stress enough just how much this game rewards the effort you put into it. Whether it be boring the shit out of yourself while you make pottery, or stumbling into zinc after dying several times. The game makes you feel a sense of accomplishment once it is all said and done. There is something to be said about the time that it takes to do almost anything meaningful in this game. Take, for example, getting your hands on iron tools in Vintage Story compared to Minecraft. Before everyone says it, yes, I know Minecraft is more about building and creativity. Make no mistake, Vintage Story is all about the building and creativity too. It just takes things and stretches them out and makes them a little bit more depthful. In order to do any of the cool building in Minecraft, you're going to need your hands on some pretty decent tools. Iron is generally the tool set I would go for with building an early game. Sure, you could do it with stone or wood, but iron makes things far less time consuming. To get iron tools, you simply need to craft one wooden pickaxe using 3 planks and 2 sticks, all of which you can get from a single tree that you punch with your fists. You can gather exactly 11 cobblestone to craft a pickaxe and a furnace, and at this point you need to find coal or make charcoal. It doesn't really matter which one you do. You could even burn your wooden pickaxe because Lord knows you're not going to use that shit again. And then you just need to find iron ore, smelt it, and combine it with 2 sticks, and bada bing bada boom, you have iron tools. You can also just get buckets and shears, all of which are really useful for building. Vintage Story is a little bit more complicated than that. You first have to pick up sticks and flint off the ground. You have to knap that flint, which napping is the act of taking stones and smacking them together to make a tool. It's interesting. You'll learn a lot when you actually play this game. It's fun stuff. Anyway, you need to knap this into the shape of an axe head, and then you attach that axe head to a stick. Cool. Once you have some logs, you need to find some clay, which you can mine with your hand or with a flint shovel, also made by knapping. Using clay, you need to make several molds like I mentioned earlier. This includes an anvil, crucible, ingot molds, pickaxe molds, hammer molds, or just whatever you think you'll need. From there, you'll need to find little bits of copper or pan them with a gold pan. Then you melt the copper using the charcoal, which that whole process of making charcoal takes like 3 days. You then pour the molten copper into a pickaxe mold and use that pickaxe to find zinc, tin, or bismuth, make bronze tools, and use those tools to mine iron ore, which you then smelt and pour into a mold to make iron tools. And I shortened this by a lot too. I didn't mention needing a hammer or a bronze anvil to shape iron ingots on an anvil if you want to. This whole process takes dozens of hours, especially when you're new. Not to mention just trying to survive. You still have to eat, you still have to farm, make armor, and prepare for the winter. There's just so much you have to do to thrive in Vintage Story. To some, I can totally understand how this is daunting. I get that. And it kinda is, but with how long it takes you to do these things in the game, it feels very natural. It doesn't feel like you're being thrown into it with everything all at once at your face. You have to work for it, and it's very slow and deliberate, and that effort to improve is amazing. In Minecraft, it's not long before you've got all the things you need to be comfortable, and I think that leads me to get a little bit bored with the game. Perhaps it's my wealth of knowledge on Minecraft, or maybe it's that the mechanics in Minecraft are pretty shallow compared to Vintage Story, and I find it difficult to really enjoy that. But this is all very personal. I know for some of you, hearing that I think Minecraft might be shallow is hard, but you need to keep in mind that this is just how I see it. If you think Minecraft has lots of depth, good for you. I'm happy you have fun with it. I just don't see it that way. Minecraft is less about surviving and the real world grounded mechanics, and more about getting to the creative and fun parts and building. Allowing you to build very quickly has a lot of merit, and I can see the value in that. Vintage Story allows you to build and be creative in the same ways, and even more so than Minecraft, to be honest. But getting to that point just takes a lot more, and I love that. As I said in my original Vintage Story review though, if it's ever too hard, players are given a myriad of difficulty options to tweak and fine-tune their ideal experience. Don't like the drifters? You can turn them off entirely. Don't care for temporal storms? Me neither, so you can turn them off or reduce their intensity and frequency. Starving too much? Turn down the hunger rate. Hell, you can even make tools more durable and mine faster if you so choose. So if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of time or patience, Vintage Story allows you to forsake the difficulty and dedication aspects for a more easygoing and creative experience. That's really nice. Very few games out there allow you to tweak the difficulty this much. Some games don't need it, honestly. Hell, I'd argue that some games benefit from not giving players that level of control. Games like Undertale wouldn't be so impactful if you were able to just reduce the damage you take in battles or increase the health a shit ton via difficulty settings. But for a survival sandbox game, this level of freedom offers a ton to all players. All this is to say that Vintage Story is easily one of the best examples of a game that rewards curiosity and dedication, but at the same time, it will punish you greatly if you lose track of your place in the world. Vintage Story doesn't let that reward come to you for free. That dedication does not come from time commitment alone, but a will to push on. This is especially apparent when you're starting the game and it feels like everything can kill you with ease. Goats, wolves, bears, simple drifters, and many other animals can make you meet your end if you're not careful. Even as you get stronger though, the game throws new challenges at you in an organic way. You know how like some RPGs, as you level up, the game will throw enemies that level up with you? Think like Skyrim as a good example of this. Vintage Story doesn't really do that. Instead, it does it in a very organic way that goes along with your curiosity about the world. Follow me here. As you find yourself with copper tools and perhaps even copper armor, you are going to begin to feel more confident in your abilities. The drifters on the surface don't hurt you as much as before, and you can fight a little bit longer. It is at this point where you are lured to go into the darkness, into the cave systems that twist and turn below your feet. As you go deeper, the enemies you face become stronger. You go from simple surface drifters to deep drifters, to corrupt drifters, and maybe even nightmare drifters, each one stronger than the last. On top of this, you'll be fighting a couple of new enemies. Locusts are tiny bug-like creatures that move very quickly and tend to spawn in groups. You can find their nests underground, or you can get unlucky and have one spawn on the underside of a cliff like I did here, which was really bizarre and disgusting. I spent a good chunk of time just staring at this because like, what the fuck? Even though they move fast, they are much weaker than drifters, doing a lot less damage and having a lot less health. They're pretty easy to dispose of, but they could still be really deadly. Finally, there is the bell. The bell is a horrifying machine that will alert other monsters of your presence. If you get too close to one, it will ring out and alarm other unnatural beings. This makes cave exploration horrifying and dangerous. This also means that progressing will take a lot of serious planning and careful movements. While you may feel tough in your copper armor and with your copper falx? Is it falx or falx? I don't know how to pronounce it. The game is quick to remind you that you are not here to conquer this world, you are here to live within it. This is where I feel Vintage Story shines. While other survival sandbox games reward your dedication and curiosity by allowing you to more or less conquer the world, I don't think Vintage Story ever lets you truly feel like you've conquered it. Games like Terraria are all about being on top and getting stronger. Yes, the sandbox elements are there, though the game undeniably has a greater focus on building yourself up. Minecraft, to a slightly lesser extent, is the same way. While there is far less to conquer in Minecraft, by the end of the game's progression, you've gotten a lot more powerful, and you have extremely powerful tools and armor, enchantments to make them even stronger than they normally would be, items that can literally prevent you from death, and a literal dragon for you to conquer and defeat. As of now, Vintage Story doesn't have any bosses. There is no big baddie to overcome. In fact, some of the biggest baddies you'll be fighting spawn into the world at the same time as you do. Bears, wolves, and other dangerous wildlife spawn right alongside you. You aren't safe from them. And honestly, even with some decent armor, you're not much better off. Wolves and bears can pretty much outrun the player, especially if you're wearing armor. And though the AI is sometimes pretty easily tricked, I tell you what, if the AI in this game was just a little bit smarter with the pathfinding, getting away from enemies would be a fucking nightmare. All this is to say that Vintage Story is firm in your placement of the world, and it wants to make sure that you are also firm in that placement. Trying to go above and beyond doesn't matter, and trying to rush can result in lots of death, pain, and loss. That is impactful. To me, that's the core of the game. This philosophy of, you did not come into this world, you are not a separate being, you came out of it. That runs deep. What I mean to say is that you are not an outsider, here to take over and conquer, but instead you are a product of the world. Though maybe not in a lore sense, the lore seems to imply that our character has time traveled into the distant future, but even if that is true, we're still products of the world. You only exist because of the food you eat, the animals you kill, and the plants that you forage. Your home is made of the materials all around you, and this feeling of connectedness becomes more clear as time passes. I've talked a bit about winter and seasons, but watching the landscape around your base go from a bright, vibrant green into a cold, pale brown and white is a haunting feeling. The passage of time is very real in Vintage Story. This world feels real. Whether you do anything or not, time is passing. Whether you choose to fuck off for a day, go exploring, or to farm and gather supplies, time is moving. Likewise, all the animals around you are living, eating, and surviving together. You can find chickens and rabbits killed by wolves or foxes. You can find animals that have fallen too far, and you can find their mangled bodies on the ground. Or you could just find their bones. The trees you plant will grow, though it takes some time. Berry bushes will flower, then fruit, and then the process restarts again. Crops grow faster or slower depending on the fertility of the soil and heat. You are not separate from this world. You're a piece of it. Everything you do has some effect on the land around you, and I think the impact of that is remarkable. If you've played this game and haven't done so, take a moment to just observe how the world is changing around you. And as you observe, you might find that the change isn't happening separately from you. You're right alongside it. I think it's typical in video games, and maybe, sometimes in the real world, to view ourselves as separate. But Vintage Story reminds you that you're not. As time flows like a river in one direction, you flow with it. Even if you try to hold on to the ground at the river's edge, you will inevitably get weak and the river will take you. Once you realize this, that there is no point of holding on, you can harness the power of that river. Flow with it. There's nothing to hold on to. You just have to let go. And when you finally do, you realize that you were never holding on to anything to begin with. You were always floating, always changing with time. When I say this game rewards your dedication and curiosity, I mean that on a really deep level. Maybe it's just me, but this game grounds me in a very interesting way. It's very philosophical for me. The idea that we are all in the same thing together and that the world is changing and that we're a part of that world, not separate. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing to think about. But to give it more relevance to gaming, it kind of reminds me of playing beta versions of Minecraft. And I apologize in advance for the tangent, but I'm going to do it anyway. Old versions of Minecraft have a lot in common with Vintage Story, which sounds weird at first, but just follow me here. There are no major structures, no huge dungeons to conquer or villages to take refuge in, at least as of now. No dragon to slay or an enchantment table to create. With a lack of sprinting, you take the game at a much slower pace. You're forced to. That slower pace allows you to think more clearly about the world around you and how you exist alongside it. While Minecraft doesn't feature seasons or any real passage of time other than day and night, it does have simplicity that makes it easy to just stop and appreciate what is happening and what you're doing. Modern Minecraft can do all these things, but the world is much more lived in, and you can very much conquer it in a way that beta Minecraft didn't really allow you to. And that's what I love about old versions of Minecraft and Vintage Story. I don't feel like I'm above everything. I feel like I'm down in the dirt with it. I love that because in real life, I'm down in the dirt with it. I'm not some creature above everything else in the world. I'm right here. I'm right alongside it. I can't exist without everything else in this world existing. That connection to real life, and trust me, Vintage Story has so many connections to real life, cannot be understated. It is a beautiful thing. At the end of the day, reward games that reward you as a player. While Vintage Story isn't for everyone, no game is, it is for me. Your curiosity and your dedication will lead you to learn new things, maybe even things about the real world. Now, do I expect everyone to have a profound experience like I do when I'm playing? No, I think that most people just enjoy the game for the mechanics and the world that it allows you to be a part of. If you want another game that rewards curiosity, creativity, and dedication, you should consider checking out my video on Animal Well. It's a fantastic and beautiful Metroidvania that is very inspired by nature, much like Vintage Story. As always, there is a link to Vintage Story's website in the description below where you can buy the game for $20. If you live in a low-income country, they do offer discounts sometimes, but you'll have to reach out to them personally for that one. I'd like to make more content on this game in the future, but I think this game deserves my best writing and my best thoughts. I don't want to just make videos on it for funsies. I want them to matter, and I want to feel like I can do this game justice with my writing. For now, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye bye!